I remember that night as if it were carved into my bones. It wasn't a knock. It was a violent kick, a sound that tore through the paper-thin walls of our dying apartment, splitting the silence of the slum like thunder through glass. The rotten door burst open, scattering splinters across the floor. And through the darkness stepped 3 men in black suits, faces carved from stone, eyes sharp as razors. The air turned heavy with smoke, damp mold, and fear. My heart, already exhausted from years of struggle, now hammered against my ribs as if trying to escape. Leo, my little brother, 18. Too young to be ruined, too old to be saved. His blue eyes, once bright with mischief, were now wide with raw, animal terror. One of the men threw a folded paper onto the cracked table. His voice was gravel, his words a death sentence. $72,000. Midnight. No extensions. That number burned into my brain like fire. Leo looked down, shaking. He didn't have to say a word. I already knew. He'd borrowed from Volkov. A name whispered in alleys, feared in daylight. And when Volkov's men came knocking, it wasn't a warning. It was a claim. I stood up, though my knees trembled. My voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the thick air. I'll pay, whatever it takes. I didn't know then that the price wouldn't be money. It would be my life. I am Evelyn Reed. A name that sounds ordinary, bland, but my life is not. Each day that passed, I struggled with the harshness of fate, an orphan girl living precariously in a small, damp apartment on the edge of the industrial district, with an unstable coffee shop job, just enough to cover the most basic needs. Dreams of a stable life, of a bright future, seemed to have been swallowed by the darkness of poverty and loneliness a long time ago. Until that fateful day, the day everything turned upside down, forever changing the trajectory of my life. A decisive, strong knock on the door echoed, completely different from the timid knocks of neighbors or the familiar knocks for rent. When I cautiously opened the worn wooden door, revealed outside was a man in an expensive suit, exquisitely tailored down to every stitch. His silver hair was neatly slicked back, exuding solemnity and authority, and his eyes were sharp, full of a confidence I had never seen in anyone. He introduced himself as a lawyer for a financial corporation whose name I had never heard, a colossal and mysterious entity. This man brought news that made me think I was dreaming. Or worse, that a nightmare was slowly becoming reality. Miss Evelyn Reed, you are the sole heir of Esther Blackwood. The lawyer's solemn voice echoed in my small room, reverberating like thunder in a clear sky, breaking the long-standing impoverished silence. Esther Blackwood. A completely unfamiliar name, yet confirmed to be my only remaining relative, whose existence I had never known. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my heart pounding uncontrollably in my chest. An unknown woman, an unfamiliar name, had left me. An enormous fortune. The lawyer explained that it was an estate worth hundreds of millions of dollars, including an ancient mansion deep in the suburbs, massive investments in the stock market, and a valuable, extensive art collection, whose value could sustain me for a lifetime. But there is always a cruel but in these flawed fairy tales. There is always a price to pay. However, the lawyer spoke, the man's eyes grew tenser, a wrinkle clearly visible on his forehead. There is a condition. The forced smile that had just appeared on my lips vanished, like a candle blown out by the wind. I knew it. I had learned from my life that nothing is free, and nothing comes easily to people like me, who always have to fight for every small bit of happiness. Mrs. Blackwood explicitly stated in her will that to receive this entire estate, you must marry a man. My breath caught, my chest tightened. Mary, I, an orphan girl, penniless, suddenly have to marry to receive an inheritance? What kind of fairy tale is this? No, this is an ironic play, a dark drama that fate has set up for me. And that person is... I stammered, feeling an unwarranted fear, an unnamed dread taking deep root in my heart. Alexander Volkov, he said, slowly, emphasizing each syllable, each word like a pronouncement. Son of Nikolai Volkov. The name Alexander Volkov. Nikolai Volkov. Immediately, a cold shiver ran down my spine, as if an icy hand had touched me. Those names were not unfamiliar. They were names associated with chilling rumors, whispered stories of underground power, of secret dealings, of a world I only knew through sensational newspaper headlines. Nikolai Volkov was a notorious kingpin, a man whose power cast a dark shadow over every corner of the city, a force no one dared challenge. And his son? It turned out this was not a beautiful dream, but a dark curse, a fateful sentence I had to bear. No, it can't be. I recoiled, hitting the cold wall of the room, feeling utterly helpless. I can't. My hands trembled, clutching the edge of the old dining table, trying to find a hopeless anchor. I don't know that man. I can't marry a man like that. I thought I could resist, could refuse this ironic fate, but the voice of reason seemed too weak against the power of authority and destiny. The lawyer looked at me with eyes full of pity, but also no less cold and pragmatic. If you refuse, the entire estate will be transferred to Nathaniel Croft, another distant relative of Mrs. Bien. Blackwood. Nathaniel Croft. That name echoed like a direct threat, a warning of lurking danger. He was a notoriously ruthless and ambitious businessman who had many successful property disputes, always seeking to seize everything he desired. I knew him. He was an old wolf, and now he was eyeing that fortune, stopping at nothing to devour it. I was utterly desperate. If I refused, I would return to my old life, or worse, be pursued by Nathaniel Croft for any reason to eliminate me, the orphan girl who almost got his fortune, a potential threat to him. Just a few days later, I was swept into a whirlwind of uncontrollable events. A sleek, endlessly long black limousine came to pick me up from my shabby apartment, taking me to a completely different world, a world I had never imagined. The Volkov family mansion appeared before my eyes like a fairy tale castle. But a gloomy castle, harboring terrifying secrets. Towering gray stone walls, soaring windows like sharp, cold eyes looking out at the world. I felt like a small bird lost in a golden cage, beautiful, splendid, yet terrifying and confining. And then I met Alexander Volkov, or Xander as I heard people whisper. The first time I saw that man, I felt as if all the air in my lungs had been sucked out. A suffocating sensation enveloped me. The man stood there, in the dim light of the vast study, tall and powerful, exuding authority. His jet black hair was neatly trimmed, his face angular with perfect features, his deep blue eyes as profound as the ocean, yet as cold as ice, devoid of any emotion. On his lips was a sneer, full of challenge, and danger, like a warning. He said nothing, just stood there, observing me like prey neatly within the hunter's control. My whole body trembled, not from cold, but from a primal fear taking deep root in my heart, a fear I had never experienced. He was the embodiment of everything I had ever avoided, everything dark and unpredictable, a storm approaching. "So you are Evelyn Reed." His voice was deep and warm, echoing in the silent space, yet carrying an undeniable control, like a command. Esther Blackwood's heir. And my future wife. Every word he spoke was like an invisible chain binding me, pulling me into the abyss of dependence and destiny. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice caught. I have no choice. My words were lost, weak, like a hopeless plea. The man moved closer, each step steady, powerful, like a predator closing in on its prey, giving me no chance to escape. His strong masculine scent, mixed with a faint smell of tobacco and something sharp and metallic, enveloped me, making me feel suffocated. No choice. Is one way of looking at it. I call it destiny. He gently touched my chin, his fingers icy cold, yet possessing a strange allure, an invisible control. I flinched, but dared not resist, completely paralyzed. The man's gaze locked onto me, deep and impenetrable, as if wanting to read my soul. "You're trembling, Evelyn," the young master said, his tone mixed with a hint of amusement, a touch of sarcasm, as if toying with my fear. "Don't be afraid. From this moment on, you are mine. And mine." Means protected. He emphasized the word protected as if it were a promise, but also a declaration of ownership, a permanent sentence. I felt as if I was caught in a strong current, unable to escape, unable to resist. Salvation? Or another prison, more splendid, more beautiful, but still a prison, where I had no freedom? "Nathaniel Croft will never be able to touch you, or anything that belongs to you," the Volkov heir whispered, his voice carrying a terrifying certainty, a vow. "He made a mistake thinking you were an easy prey, a weak target. But he forgot that you now belong to me." His words were a warning, not just for me, but for anyone who dared to think of threatening me, a declaration of absolute power. It was an assurance of safety, but at the same time, an affirmation of absolute ownership, making me wonder, was this protection a golden cage, or was it truly a sturdy steel shield against the cruel world out there? And would I ever truly be free in this man's arms? I couldn't find the answer. Chapter 2. Discovery and Tension. My life at the Volkov mansion was a dizzying, overwhelming change that I found hard to accept. From a cramped, damp, and lonely apartment, I stepped into a completely different world, a world of luxury and danger, where every step held surprises. Ancient, towering stone walls, long, winding corridors like a labyrinth, vast rooms lavishly decorated with precious paintings, exquisitely carved antique furniture. Every corner of the house exuded majesty, a magnificent beauty, yet also harbored an indescribable coldness, as if it were concealing age-old secrets, the dark stories of this family. I was given a most luxurious bedroom, with a view of the vast, lush garden, but I felt more lost than ever, a lonely soul amidst the splendor. I was a small bird, now placed in a golden cage, beautiful, but still a cage. Xander. Or young Master Volkov, as the respectful servants called him, was an enigmatic man, a living mystery. He had a cold, distant demeanor, always maintaining an invisible distance from everyone, like a solid fortress wall. He spent most of his time in his study, or was away on business I wasn't allowed to know about, his secret dealings. He was a mysterious shadow, sometimes appearing unexpectedly like a gust of wind, sometimes vanishing without a trace like mist. But whenever he appeared, his presence filled the room, the air becoming thick and tense, as if everything had to stop to acknowledge him. I tried to keep my distance from that man, but I couldn't. We lived under the same roof, about to marry, bound together by an undeniable destiny. My life now revolved around the unwritten rules of this family, the scrutinizing glances from the servants, and especially the undeniable presence of that man, a powerful presence. I was not allowed to leave the mansion alone. All my activities were monitored by silent, strong bodyguards, shadows always clinging to me. I felt imprisoned, but it was a safe imprisonment, a safety exchanged for freedom. One evening, as I sat in the mansion's enormous library, flipping through old books, smelling paper and ink, Xander walked in. He wore luxurious black silk pajamas, his hair slightly disheveled, and I could smell a faint scent of whiskey from him, a very masculine aroma. He said nothing, just poured another glass of wine, then sat down in the armchair opposite me, silently observing, his gaze as if wanting to penetrate me. The young master's deep gaze swept over me, then stopped at the book in my hand, as if searching for something. "What are you reading?" he asked, his voice deep and warm, yet carrying a hint of probing, a hidden curiosity. "An old detective novel," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, but my heart still pounded wildly, as if wanting to leap out of my chest. "You like mysteries?" He smirked, a smile full of hidden meaning. Then you've come to the right place. The man's words sent shivers down my spine. His world was a dark and dangerous mystery, a labyrinth I was slowly being drawn into. In the following days, I began to notice small things about this man, details I hadn't paid attention to before. He always woke up early, practicing martial arts in his private gym, his punches strong and decisive. He drank black coffee without sugar, its bitter taste like his own life. He had a faint scar on his temple, a trace of a life that was far from peaceful, evidence of the battles he had endured. Sometimes, when he thought I wasn't paying attention, his eyes would become distant, holding a deep sadness I couldn't explain, a loneliness he always tried to hide. I wondered, behind that cold and ruthless exterior, was there another person, torn by burdens I couldn't understand, secrets he carried? One afternoon, I accidentally overheard his conversation with his private lawyer in his study. The door was ajar, and I heard the words forged will, illegal transactions, market manipulation. He was talking about Nathaniel Croft and his schemes to seize Mrs. Esther Blackwood's assets, as well as the Volkov family's dealings, dark transactions I couldn't fully comprehend. I suddenly realized that my inheritance was not just money, but also a part of his power struggle, an important chess piece in his grand game. Mrs. Blackwood might have known this beforehand, and had used me as a pawn in her grand game, collateral for a larger purpose. I was not a lucky bride, but a key pawn, a key to unlock the door to the truth. In Mrs. Esther Blackwood's will, besides the marriage condition, there was another secret clause, something that only I, with my photographic memory and attention to detail, could decipher. Mrs. Blackwood was an eccentric art collector, and among the works I inherited, there was an old, seemingly worthless painting hidden in a secluded corner of the library. At first, I didn't pay attention to it, just thinking it was an old item. But then, when I saw Xander and Nikolai Volkov discussing missing ledgers and hidden important documents that Nathaniel Croft was looking for, a light flashed in my head, a strange connection. I recalled a small quote from Mrs. Blackwood in an old diary I found, written in delicate handwriting. The secret lies in plain sight, but not for all. I secretly returned to the library, my heart pounding, and took down the old painting. Behind the frame, hidden beneath a layer of yellowed cardboard, was a rough cloth bag. Inside, I found an old USB drive and a handwritten letter. The letter explained that this painting was created by an artist who had hidden in the underworld someone who had accidentally recorded evidence of Nathaniel Croft's illegal activities, including forging wills and money laundering through shell companies, illegal transactions. Mrs. Blackwood had kept this evidence to protect someone. And now, it became a tool to protect me, a shield against dark forces. I knew that this evidence was what Nathaniel Croft was looking for, something he was willing to do anything to destroy. And it was also something Xander Volkov could use to defeat him, to put an end to his arrogance. I brought the USB drive and the letter to Xander, placing it on his desk, my hands still trembling. He looked at me, his eyes cold as if scrutinizing, then picked up the USB drive. When he plugged it into the computer, the information that appeared on the screen made his face tense, serious. How did you find this? He asked, his voice deeper than usual, mixed with surprise and a hint of caution, as if testing me. I remembered a small detail in Mrs. Blackwood's diary, I replied, explaining about the message and the painting, trying to stay calm. She said, "The secret lies in plain sight." Xander looked at me intently. His gaze seemed to soften a little, or at least become less cold, a small change I hadn't expected. "You have sharp eyes, Evelyn," the heir said, with a rare smirk, a recognition, and an incredible memory. He didn't praise me with flowery words, but I felt a small respect, an appreciation. I had proven my worth, not just as a forced bride, but also as a potential partner, someone useful to him. That's when I realized he didn't just need me for the will to be fulfilled. He needed my skills, the small details I could see, the pieces I could connect to form a complete picture. I was the conscience of this story, but also an indispensable part of his battle, and reluctant ally. The tension between us didn't lessen, but it changed. His coldness was no longer just distance, but sometimes mixed with unexpected protective actions, small gestures I couldn't explain. Once, when I fumbled in the large kitchen, knocking over a stack of plates, he appeared immediately, without a word of reproach, just bent down to pick up the broken pieces, his hand gently touching mine as he handed me the broom. Another time, I caught a cold, and he personally brought me a hot bowl of soup. Although his eyes were still cold, that concern was real, genuine. Those small moments, those unexpected gentle gestures from a terrifying man, confused me, making me wonder if he was truly a devil. I began to feel a strange attraction to him. The safety he provided was undeniable. Within his embrace, I felt protected from the cruel world outside, from dangers I had never imagined. But at the same time, I felt disgusted with myself. How could I be attracted to a man like that? A man who lived in the shadows, with his own rules and dangerous connections. This feeling was a betrayal of my reason, a curse upon my heart. It was a deep internal struggle, a forbidden desire silently growing within me. On a stormy night, as the entire mansion was engulfed in thunder and howling wind, I couldn't sleep. I went down to the kitchen to make tea, and found him sitting in the living room, his eyes gazing out the window, pensive. He wasn't sleeping at all, as if something was weighing heavily on the man's mind. I saw a deep weariness etched on the man's face, a loneliness he always tried to hide. I placed the teacup on the table, then quietly sat down in the chair opposite. "Can't you sleep?" I asked, my voice soft, breaking the silence. He turned to look at me, his deep blue eyes meeting mine, as if wanting to penetrate my soul, searching for answers. "There are things that cannot rest, Evelyn," the man replied, his voice hoarse. He didn't explain further, but I understood. He carried on his shoulders the burden of an empire, of secrets and incessant threats. "I know that," I said, recalling the long nights I tossed and turned in fear of the future, of the unpredictable. "Me too." He stood up, walked to the window, looking out at the pitch-black night, as if wanting to see through everything. "This world is not lenient with the weak, Evelyn," the young master said, his tone carrying the experience and bitterness of someone who had been through many storms. "And even less lenient with those who possess valuable things." He turned back, his gaze locked on me. "Now you are mine. Everything that belongs to you belongs to me, and I will not let anyone touch what is mine." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was even more powerful than that. It was a declaration of absolute ownership and protection, an assurance that I was safe in his arms, no matter how dark those arms might be. And I wondered, could my heart endure this dangerous safety? Could I find love in the darkness he brought, or only despair and loss, a permanent loss? I couldn't find the answer, only felt myself increasingly drawn into this vortex of destiny. Chapter 3. Major Revelation and Explosion. The evidence I found in the painting became a ticking time bomb in the war between the Volkov family and Nathaniel Croft. With that USB drive, Xander could overthrow Nathaniel, expose his dark dealings, and bring him to justice. But Nathaniel Croft was not one to give up easily. He knew that I was the weakest link, the point he could exploit to achieve his goals, to win. He began to target me, little by little, subtly and cruelly. Anonymous phone calls began. Veiled threats were sent via email, through letters with no sender address, slipped under my room door, cold and haunting. Although the mansion was strictly protected with a state-of-the-art security system, I still felt a cold fear crawl down my spine. I knew he was somewhere, watching me, waiting for the right moment, like a predator stalking its prey. Xander had increased security, assigning extra personal bodyguards to follow me whenever I left my room. He had made me the center of a solid protective circle, an impenetrable fortress, but I still couldn't escape the feeling of being threatened, an invisible fear. One afternoon, I decided to go to the garden to find a little peace, a quiet moment for myself. I missed the scent of damp earth and flower petals, something I had longed for, something I couldn't find within the cold stone walls. As I was admiring the blooming roses, their soft petals, a shadow darted past. I didn't have time to react. A rough hand clamped over my mouth, pulling me into the dense, sharp bushes, as if wanting to tear me apart. My heart pounded in my chest, a choked cry caught in my throat, unable to escape. I struggled, trying to fight with all my might, but the attacker was too strong, too aggressive. He pushed me to the ground, the smell of mud and dry leaves assailing my nose, making me feel uncomfortable. A gleaming knife grazed my throat, icy cold and sharp, as if wanting to cut off my breath. "Don't scream," a hoarse voice whispered in my ear, full of threat. "Smart girl. You know what you're holding. Hand it over. Or else." The assailant didn't need to finish the sentence. I knew what would happen. He wanted the USB drive. He wanted the evidence I had found. He was Nathaniel Croft's man, that devil's henchman. Extreme fear enveloped me. I thought my life would end here, in this beautiful garden, under the blade of a stranger, a meaningless death. But then, like a flash of lightning in a clear sky, a loud noise rang out. My attacker was suddenly yanked away, a painful scream tearing through the air. I tried to lift my head, and in my eyes appeared the figure of Alexander Volkov, a guardian angel in the form of a devil. The man stood there, tall and imposing, his deep blue eyes burning in the deepening night, like hellfire. His usually cold face was now contorted with rage, an extreme fury I had never seen. That was not a human. That was a monster, a devil awakened from a deep slumber. He lunged at my attacker, without a word, only angry, primal growls. His punch was powerful and decisive, making the other man stumble. Xander didn't stop. He unleashed continuous kicks and punches, each blow carrying a brutal, deadly force, as if wanting to crush his opponent. He didn't just hit, he annihilated. I lay there, witnessing that horrifying scene, my whole body trembling, motionless. I had never seen a man so terrifying, such a terrifying rage. He was not a protector. He was a tool of destruction, a war machine. I saw blood splatter from the attacker, the sound of bones cracking in the air, horrifying sounds. Xander had no intention of stopping until the man lay motionless at his feet, lifeless. He showed no mercy, not an ounce of pity. After the attacker collapsed, Xander turned to look at me. His eyes were still burning with rage, but when he saw me, that anger seemed to subside, replaced by a worry, a fear I had never seen on that powerful man's face. He rushed to my side, knelt down, his trembling hands touching my face, checking if I was hurt, each finger gently stroking my skin. "Evelyn, are you all right?" His voice was hoarse, full of worry, as if his fear was even greater than mine. He held me tightly, his strong arms enveloping me, as if wanting to protect me from everything in the world, from all dangers. I felt his strong heartbeat, the man's hurried breath. I didn't know whether I should feel afraid or protected. Both feelings intertwined, forming a chaotic mess within me, an internal struggle. I shook my head, tears of fear streaming down my cheeks, soaking wet. I'm fine. He held me as I stood up, his body still tense, but his gaze had softened, reserved only for me, as if only I existed in his world. "He touched you," the man whispered, his voice now cold and deadly, full of menace. "No one is allowed to touch what belongs to me." His words were a promise, a vow. He would protect me, at all costs, even if he had to destroy anyone who dared to harm me. That was not love in the usual sense. It was an intense possessiveness, a primal, brutal, uncontrollable protective instinct. Immediately after that night, the fear still haunted me, but something else had blossomed. I saw a new side of Xander, a terrifying ruthlessness, but also an absolute protection, an unconditional sacrifice. I knew I should be afraid of him, but I couldn't. My heart, already weak and lonely, was strangely drawn to his strength and intensity. I felt myself being pulled into a dark abyss, a place I never thought I would go, but didn't want to escape, a deadly allure. That night, after everything had been resolved, the attacker taken away, I sat in the living room, drinking a hot cup of tea, trying to calm myself. Xander walked in. His eyes had returned to their usual coldness, but I could feel an underlying tension in the man's body, a weariness he was trying to hide. He sat down in the chair opposite, looking at me intently, as if wanting to read my soul. "You're safe now, Evelyn," he said, his voice softer than I expected, a rare tenderness. "He will never bother you again, or anyone else belonging to Nathaniel Croft." I know, I said, my voice trembling, still haunted by what had happened. "Thank you." He stood up, walked to me, gently pulled me to my feet, the man's movement full of authority. "I told you already. You are mine. And mine." Means inviolable. He reached out and touched my cheek, his fingers gently stroking, as if wanting to erase the fear from my face, like a comforting gesture. His eyes were deep, captivating, full of enchantment. "I will not let anyone hurt you." Anyone. And then he leaned down, his cold lips touching mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss, but an intense, possessive kiss, as if wanting to assert his ownership over me, like a permanent mark. I felt his desperation, the man's anger, and something soft, vulnerable that he always tried to hide, another side of him. I responded, with all my fear, confusion, and a hint of forbidden desire surging within me. I was disgusted with myself for being so attracted to him, but I couldn't stop it. I wondered, was this kiss a promise of eternal protection, or was it a sentence, that I would forever be bound to his darkness, unable to escape? That was the moment I knew I was completely drawn into Alexander Volkov's world. He was the man who saved me from the threat of Nathaniel Croft, but also the man who was pulling me into a complex, dark relationship, where the line between love and possessiveness became blurred, hard to distinguish. I had seen his brutality, but I also saw his absolute protection. I wondered, could I live in this world, or would I be swallowed by it, no longer myself? Could my heart find peace in the arms of a devil, or would I forever be torn between light and darkness, between reason and emotion? One night, Xander and I sat in his study. He was reviewing the documents from the USB drive, the encrypted evidence I had found. The desk lamp cast light on the man's angular face, creating deep shadows, further enhancing his mysterious aura. "This evidence is more than enough to finish Nathaniel Croft," he said, his voice deep and cold, devoid of emotion. He was too arrogant to think he could outsmart us, and especially Esther Blackwood. I looked at him, my heart still pounding after the incident in the garden. "What will you do with him?" Xander looked up. His deep blue eyes met mine. "He will pay, not just for what he did to the Volkov family, but also for daring to touch you." He emphasized the words "touch you," as if it were an unforgivable sin, an insult that could not be overlooked. In my world, there are lines that cannot be crossed. And you are that line. I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't a threat, but a declaration of absolute ownership, an assurance that I had become an inseparable part of him, a priceless asset he would protect at all costs. I understand, I replied, my voice soft. I knew that, in his eyes, I was not just an heir, not just a contract wife. I was his, something more precious than money or power, something he would never let go of. The man moved closer to me, took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, a strong connection. The warmth from his hand spread, soothing the fear creeping within me, bringing a sense of security. "You don't need to understand my entire world, Evelyn," he said, his voice deeper, almost a whisper, a gentle murmur. "You just need to know that, with me, you will be safe. No one can harm you. No one can take anything from you. I will not allow that to happen." He lifted my hand, placing a light kiss on the back of it. That gesture was both subtle and powerful, like a mark, a declaration of ownership. You are mine, Evelyn. Forever mine. His words echoed in the room, carrying an undeniable weight. I knew that my life had forever changed. I was bound to Alexander Volkov, to his dark world. And I wondered, could I find happiness, or even peace, in the arms of this terrifying yet protective man? Could I love a man who had broken every boundary for me, or would I forever be a hostage in my own heart, torn between love and fear? Chapter 4. Psychological Struggle and Action. After the attack in the garden, the atmosphere in the Volkov mansion became heavier than ever. Xander didn't say much, but I could feel the tension enveloping him, like a dark cloud hovering. I knew he was preparing for a major confrontation with Nathaniel Croft, an unavoidable battle. Each day that passed, I felt like I was waiting for a ticking time bomb, an event that would change everything. The man's silence was not peaceful, but the terrifying calm before a great storm was about to hit. I also began to realize another aspect of that person, a deep wound. His obsession with protecting the vulnerable, especially women and children, seemed to have a deep root, a painful story in the past. One night, when I couldn't sleep, I found him sitting in the study, staring at an old, yellowed photograph. It was a picture of a young, beautiful woman with a sad smile, holding a baby girl. I recognized her as his mother and the little girl. Probably his sister, Lily, whom I had vaguely heard had died young, a family tragedy. Xander's eyes in that photo, even as a child, held an unconcealable sadness, an inconsolable loss. I felt his obsession, his helplessness at not being able to protect his loved ones. That was why he had become so cold, ruthless, and power-hungry. He didn't want anyone to go through the pain he had experienced, and he would never let any woman under his protection suffer abuse or loss like that. That explained the absolute, almost fanatical protection he gave me. I was the embodiment of salvation, a second chance for him to correct past mistakes, someone he could completely protect and control, a new purpose in his life. Xander was no longer an emotionless shadow. He was a deeply wounded man, haunted by the past, and craving control so he would never have to endure the pain of loss again. That complexity, that darkness, only drew me to him more. I was disgusted with myself for loving such a man the outside world would call a criminal, a devil. But deep down, I knew that he was my own devil, and he would never let anyone harm me, never. The final confrontation took place a few weeks later. Xander had gathered all the evidence, meticulously prepared everything, leaving no detail overlooked. He decided not to use conventional law, but his own law, a rule of the underworld that he controlled. An appointment was set, a secret meeting with Nathaniel Croft and his accomplices, at an abandoned warehouse in the southern industrial district of the city, a location promising a fierce battle. Xander knew it was a trap, but he was ready to face it. I wanted to go with him, to be by his side, to go through every challenge with him, but he refused. "This is not a place for you, Evelyn," he said, his eyes cold, but I saw a fleeting tenderness, a deep concern. "You stay here, safe. I will return." He kissed my forehead, a gentle kiss, full of promise, yet also containing an invisible fear, a hidden farewell. Wait for me. The hours of waiting were the most terrifying hours of my life. I paced back and forth in the living room, looking out the window, each minute passing like a century. Every small sound made me jump, my heart pounding. I imagined the worst things, horrifying scenarios, terrifying images. I didn't know if Xander would return. I didn't know if I could live without him, if my life would have any meaning without this man. I was disgusted with myself for letting this feeling grow so strong, but I couldn't deny it, couldn't erase it from my heart. When the phone rang, I almost collapsed. It was one of Xander's bodyguards. "The young master has completed everything, miss," the person said, their voice tense. "But he is injured." My heart almost stopped. Injured? I didn't ask anything further, just rushed out the door. Ignoring the servant's advice, I grabbed the car keys and sped off. I couldn't wait. I had to go to him, had to go to my man. I found him at a secret safe house of the Volkov family, a discreet hideaway. He was lying on the sofa, his white shirt stained red in a large patch on his shoulder, blood still seeping through. A private doctor was bandaging his wound, his face serious. The man's face was pale, but his eyes were still resolute, strong, without a hint of weakness. When I walked in, his eyes immediately found me, and a tired smile appeared on his lips, a smile that comforted me. "You came," he whispered, his voice weak, yet still containing warmth. I rushed to his side, knelt down, my trembling hands touching the man's face, gently stroking. "Xander, are you all right?" Tears streamed down my cheeks, unable to be held back. I felt extreme fear seeing him injured, a pain that pierced my heart. He took my hand, squeezed it tightly, conveying the man's warmth to me. "Just a small scratch. Don't worry." But I knew it wasn't a small scratch. He had paid a price for my protection. He had sacrificed a part of his body for me, for my safety. The doctor had left, leaving us alone in the quiet space. I gently took off his shirt, helping him change the bandage. The wound was deep and wide, but he didn't groan, not a single cry of pain. I saw deep weariness in the man's eyes, but I also saw a sense of peace. He had completed his mission, eliminated the threat, and protected me, protected us. "Nathaniel Croft will never bother us again," he said, his voice hoarse, full of certainty, like an assurance. "He has paid the price for what he did. And for daring to touch you." I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth from the man's body, a warmth that soothed all the pain within me. "You did all that for me," I whispered. "You sacrificed for me." He gently stroked my hair. "There is no sacrifice when it's for you, Evelyn," the man replied. "You are mine, forever mine. I will do everything to protect you, to keep you safe. That is my promise. That is our destiny." It was a declaration of love in his dark and violent way. His violence was not meaningless destruction, but an act of absolute protection, a way for him to prove his love. That love was stronger than fear, stronger than all rules, stronger than even death. I looked at him, my eyes filled with tears, but in my heart, there was no more fear. Only an intense love, a complete acceptance. I had fallen in love with a terrifying man, a devil, but he was my devil, and I would never change that. I wondered, could my life find true happiness in the arms of this man, who had broken every barrier, every rule for me, or would I forever be bound by his darkness and power? But in that moment, as he held me close, I knew that I had found where I belonged, no matter how dark that place might be. I had found love, safety, and even myself in his world. Chapter 5: Redemption and Conclusion. After that night, everything gradually settled, like a lake after a fierce storm. Nathaniel Croft was completely removed from the power landscape, not only no longer a threat to me or the Volkov family, but also facing the devastating consequences Xander had reserved for him. The information from the USB drive I found helped Xander expose Nathaniel's entire network, not only ending his dark career, but also significantly weakening other rival organizations, solidifying the Volkov family's position. Xander's world, though still full of secrets and underground power, had become more stable, and I, now, was no longer a hostage or a contract bride, but an indispensable part of that man's life, a partner, a life companion. Xander's redemption did not come through empty apologies or flowery gestures, not through sweet words. It was expressed through actions, through subtle changes in how he treated me and the world around him. He had accepted me not just as an heir, but as a partner, his conscience, the only one who could see deep into his soul. The marriage clause in the will had been fulfilled, but its meaning had completely changed. Now, it was no longer a binding obligation, but a vow, a lifelong commitment, a testament to true love. We married in a private, intimate ceremony at the Volkov mansion, witnessed by Nikolai Volkov and a few of our closest confidants, those who had witnessed our journey. I wore a pristine white wedding dress, symbolizing purity and hope, standing beside Xander in a sophisticated black suit, exuding authority. His eyes, usually cold, now shone with a rare tenderness, a promise of a future I had never dared to dream of, a peaceful future by his side. As he kissed my lips, I knew that I truly belonged to him, and he belonged to me, by an unbreakable thread of destiny, a thread of love and trust. My life at the Volkov mansion had completely changed. I no longer felt imprisoned, but rather the mistress of a powerful family, a solid fortress. Xander was no longer distant, but my life partner, my protector, and my lover, everything I needed. He began to share more about his work with me, listening to my opinions, valuing my words. He didn't force me to understand his entire dark world, but he allowed me to become a part of it, bringing light and peace to the hidden corners of his life, places no one could touch before. Soon after, good news arrived. I was pregnant. When I told Xander, his face, usually calm, suddenly erupted in an emotion I had never seen, a joy mixed with fear, a deep anxiety. The obsession with not being able to protect his sister, Lily, had haunted him for so many years, and now he had a second chance to correct his mistakes, to protect a tiny life. He swore he would never let anything bad happen to our child. He would be a wonderful father, no matter how dark he might be, because the love for our child and for me would be the guiding light for him. The mansion, once a cold and mysterious place, was now filled with laughter and warmth, brimming with life. We renovated a part of the mansion to prepare for the baby's arrival, transforming an old room into a warm nursery. Xander personally chose the furniture, overseeing every small detail, showing the man's meticulous care. I looked at him, the man who was once my greatest fear, now everything I longed for, the solid anchor for my life. His redemption was not just about protecting me, but also about the man's own transformation. He learned to open up more, to trust, and to love in a way he had never known, a sincere and deep love. He was still Alexander Volkov, the powerful and terrifying man, but he was also Xander, the devoted husband and loving father, a more complete person. I often sat in the garden, a place where I once experienced extreme fear, but now it was where I found peace, a safe haven. I gazed at the carefully tended garden, the blooming roses, the ancient trees stretching upwards, all vibrant and full of life. I recalled the early days, when I was just an orphan girl, lost and afraid, with no one by my side. Now, I had a family, a home, and a love I never thought I would find, a love that had transformed my life. One afternoon, I was sitting on a stone bench in the garden, reading, and felt the baby stir in my womb, a surge of happiness. Xander walked over, sat down beside me, the man's strong arm embracing me, conveying his warmth to me. He placed his hand on my belly, feeling every tiny movement, a faint smile on his lips. "This world will not harm our child, Evelyn," he whispered, his voice deep and warm, full of promise, a definite assurance. "I will not allow it." I looked at him, smiling. "I know." In the setting sun, painting the sky red, our silhouettes stretched long on the lush green grass, blending into each other. It was an image of peace, of a family, of a love that had overcome all storms, all darkness, to find light. I had found my own fairy tale, not a typical romantic fairy tale, but a dark, intense, and challenging love story, a story that only he and I understood. I, Evelyn Reed, had received an enormous fortune and had married the kingpin's son. But I had received more than that. I had received absolute safety, an eternal love, and a family I never thought I would have, a family built on trust and love. Alexander Volkov had redeemed himself by making me his world, making me the reason for him to live, for him to fight, for him to become a better man. And I wondered, could there be any greater happiness than that? Greater than being loved and protected by a man who dared to break every rule for me, dared to sacrifice everything for me? Perhaps not. My life, now, was a vivid testament to how love can blossom even in the darkest corners, transforming an orphan girl into a queen in a kingpin's empire. That is my story, the story of Evelyn's love and her man, a love strong, unshakable, enduring through all darkness and challenges, forever.